A very warm good evening to all of you. Welcome to the 243rd session of CENTA's webinar series for teachers. We have a wonderful program for you today, a wonderful webinar waiting for you today. The topic for today's webinar is Developing Number Sense, Strategic Reasoning, and Critical Thinking with Yonjuu. And the facilitator for this session is Ms. Jaspreet Sethi. Ms. Jaspreet Sethi is the founder of Hattennoki, or Math with a Smile. She has a rich background as a teacher, trainer, and game creator, amassing over 2 decades of expertise in the education system. Armed with a master's in mathematics education from Teachers College, Columbia University, she has held pivotal roles, including department chair for middle school mathematics at the Birch Wathen Lenox School and advisory board member for teacher education. Focused on mathematics, English language, and social emotional learning, Hattennoki revolutionizes learning paradigms, offering comprehensive resources for holistic development. Welcome, Ms. Jaspreet Sethi. But before I hand over the session to you, I would like to inform all teachers that they will receive a participation certificate for the session. So please fill out the feedback form that will be shared with you towards the end of the session. Participants, please do share with us your name, the city from where you are joining, and also the school or institution you are working with. Thank you. And over to you, Ms. Jaspreet Sethi.
Good evening. Thank you so much for that intro. Thank you, Senta. Please call me Jas. And with all of that intro, I have to say that I have seen myself as a learner and also a math enthusiast. So at this point, usually when I do a webinar, I get my participants to play with me. Today, you are going to learn more about the game that I have developed, and hopefully you will be a subscriber and a supporter. So I'll start with a story that I heard as a department chair from a teacher in a closed room, and the name has been changed. Gina does not pay attention in class. This is a fellow teacher of mine telling me about her classroom challenges. And thinking of her, Gina, as a parent, as an educational consultant, as an observer, the question that came to me was, why is Gina not paying attention? And it was very easy for the teacher to answer that because she finds it boring. And that's so true. And why does Gina find math class boring? So we went back and forth, and then we were cogitating what could be the reasons. We came up, and the teacher came up with so many reasons that had nothing to do with Gina or herself. And in my mind, I kept thinking because she can't connect with the material or the teacher. And why can't she connect? It's because the teacher or the parent does not have access to tools to make math class engaging as well as meaningful. And yet on PTM day or in the report card, Gina will be described as naughty, talkative, and lacking focus. The truth is, children, just like grown-ups, can be hungry, angry, lonely, tired, anxious, grieving, traumatized, confused, frustrated, requiring connection, acknowledgement of their feelings. And Gina is very curious and enthusiastic, but her spirit is shunned by a block or divide, and she is not adequately challenged and engaged. Now, what is this divide? I'm not going to read through this, but I have coined a term called the math divide, where I usually start any of my professional development with sharing with teachers and educators something that comes in the way of math learning. And then we as teachers hold responsibility to make sure that this math divide goes to math agility. So for tools, all teachers, I think, especially as math educators, are looking for the foremost thing, which is developing number sense in their students, in their learners. They want to, with especially post-COVID, having understood how play plays such an important role in learning, want to make their classes multisensory and engaging. And we want to construct and nurture strategic thinking in our children and our learners. We want and we understand that meaningful play will invite the learner to engage in the classroom and beyond. We want to instill critical thinking, and we also want to do it in a way that there is social emotional learning always happening in any classroom. That's the fabric that holds all of us together. So, with all of these needs in mind, I developed Yonjuu. And I'm so happy that in the time that I have developed the game, I have received a lot of love and appreciation for how easy and how impactful it has been. And I'm here to share the experience of the game as well as the uses of the cards beyond the basic version of the game with you today. So let's play without the cards for some of you. Some of you actually have access to the cards. Um, so, what does the deck contain? The deck consists of 44 0 to 10 number cards, which are in the form of black circles, red triangles, green pentagons, and blue squares. There are also 4 trump cards, which look like this, which say now all one of the colors carry a negative value. This is something that I would suggest is used when child or a learner is 12 to 13 plus. But prior to that, let's try to understand the basic version of the game, which is 6, 7 plus. So assume we have 2 players right now, and we're shuffling the cards, the 44 cards, and giving 6 cards to each player. So we have player A and player B, A on the left, B on the right. With the 6 cards that you've received, initially, instead of holding it in your hand like a fan, I suggest users to actually put it on the table so that all of us can help each other out and overlook and do the math or help in the math for anybody who's struggling. And the objective is to get Yonjuu, which means 40 in the Japanese language. But the way to get Yonjuu is to basically build that target number using all the 6 cards that have been received with some sort of replacement depending on the sum total that we begin with. So the sum total is basically the addition of all of the numbers on the cards. The colors right now don't hold any significance at the moment. One way that I suggest students or learners to actually add their cards is to not go with random values. So we're going to go ahead and use a very strategic way to add player A's cards. So we're going to find partners of 10. And the cards are very visual. They're put in these 10 frames. So it's very easy for you to see that 8, for example, needs 2 more to become a 10. So that's a partner of 10, 8 and 2. Another partner of 10 for player 1 or player A is 4 and 6. So that's another 10. 10 and 10 make 20. And player 1, adding the 0 and the 9, has 29 points right now. Let's do the same for player 2. Player 2 already has a 10 and can make partners of 10 looking at 7 and perhaps 3, or make groups of 10, which would be 7, 2 and 1, or 5, 3 and 2. Sticking to one of the ways that they would do this, perhaps this one, then player 2's final points or sum total is 20, 10 plus 10, 20, plus 8, 7 and 1, 28. So player 1 is right now 11 points away from Yonjuu, which is the number 40, and player 2 is 12 points away from Yonjuu. So now we start picking cards, drawing cards from the draw pile, which was kept face down after these 6 and 6 cards were distributed to the players. So after picking a card, player 1 sees that player 1 is getting a 10. The question that player 1 needs to ask is this card useful for me? Always maintaining 6 cards, this is a very useful card for player 1. So player one takes this card and discards, always maintaining those 6 cards, discards their 0, their lowest score right now, the lowest card right now. So this 0 goes into a discard pile. So there's a draw pile and there's a discard pile, and both of these are going to be kept face down after the player has played. And please notice how player 1 has gone from 29 points now to 39 points. Now it's player 2's turn. Player 2 gets an 8. Here is where strategic thinking comes in. Is it useful? Yes, definitely it's useful. But if I take this 8 and I do have to discard something, which card should I discard? Again, it's 28 points, so I want to discard my lowest card, which is 1. But now my score is not going to be 28 plus 8, but it'll be also be a minus 1 because that net difference is 7. So player two's new set of points is from 28 elevated to 35 points. Now it is player one's turn. Player one gets a 0, not useful. So player one does not have to do any replacement, goes ahead and discards this 0. Player two's turn again. Player 2 gets a 7. Strategic thinking again. Is this card useful for me? Well, player 2 is at 35 points now, needs 5 more points to get Yonjuu and win. But this is a 7. How can player 2 actually use this card to their advantage? By taking the 7 and discarding the 2 so that the net difference is 5, which is when the player is going to shout Yonjuu and declare themselves the winner. So this is the basic version of the game, appropriate for a 6, 7, 8-year-old. Now, you are teachers of other grades as well. I'm aware of that. So here are some adaptations once the learners become very comfortable with the game. I make them play Yonjuu, a modified version of Yonjuu, which is Sanju. So I will reduce the number of cards. Instead of 6, we'll play with 4 cards, I say. And the target number is not Yonjuu, which is 40, but 30. So, and you can do that with any number. You can play with 8 cards and do a target number of 60, which is Rokuju. The point is that you're doing a lot of adaptations with the cards at the moment with only addition as the operation. So Yonjuu can also be played with just blue and green cards. So then that means they have to discard their red and black cards as well to still make the target number of 40. Or with only red and black cards. That means they have to discard their green and blue cards. Advanced Yonjuu, which will be, as I said, for 12 or 13 plus, which is where we will introduce more math operations beyond addition. So here is where you can actually bring in the trump cards, which is when if the trump card appears, then those scores that we have added, for example, in this situation, right now, there are 39 points, including the green cards. But if the trump card comes in, which says now all green cards carry a negative value, then those 13 points that we have of green, 4 and 9, are going to get reduced and further another 13 points because they carry negative value. It's not that they are nil cards, they are carrying negative value. So without the cards, it's 26. Without the green card, it's 26 points. And now 26 minus that 13, you're going to come down to 13 points. So you thought you're winning at 39, almost winning, but then you come down. So that is one way to adapt the game. There are other adaptations when you introduce other math operations such as square root, percentages, multiplication, division, mod. Sky is a limit. This is one simulation of Yonjuu being played with other math operations. And this is when it almost becomes like a chess game where the students are actually writing out and putting their brackets or their parentheses in the right spot to actually make that target number, in this case, still sticking to Yonjuu, which is 40. Here's another example, doing it with 10, 7, 4, 2, 5, 3, which is 10 mod 7 times 4 squared minus 5 plus 3 still giving me 40. I'm also using the cards in classrooms to teach a variety of math concepts. So we're using it for place value, which is, I think, very evident, but I like to always show it with examples, especially when we have introduced tens and ones, and we are getting the children to read the numbers. Then we put a sticky for tens and ones, and we go ahead and read the number as 58 with 5 tens and 8 ones. And then we also do a replacement and interchange and get to read it with 8 tens and 5 ones, being 85. A lot of place value activities are already in place with Yonjuu, arranging the cards to create the largest three-digit number possible, largest three-digit even number possible, and all of that because it's so tactile for kids to move around the cards and actually visually see this happen. It makes it much more multisensory and effective for students to really understand place value, especially going above and beyond the tens and ones. I also use it for addition. So a very simple example would be if I wanted to collect all the pentagons on these cards and ask my student to do a 7 plus 5, usually at this point, when you're introducing addition, a lot of teachers lack tools to be able to explain how 7 plus 5 is actually the same as 10 plus 2. So the cards become very visual then because the students or the learners can see these three empty spots to make the 7 or 10. So these pentagons, if they go and fill this spot and make that a 10, then I'm only left with 2 here and that becomes a 10. And 10 plus 2, which is a fast 10, it's an easier way to add, which is what our mind does. But sometimes that visual is very important for learners learning the concept. Same with subtraction. A lot of times we are using just the analogy of taking away. So I start with taking away, but then I do questions such as how many more squares are here as compared to here. So again, it's easier for students to visually see, learners to visually see that those 3 empty spots are making 7, 3 less than 10, or 10, 3 more than 7. I also use them to introduce multiplication as being nothing but repeated addition. So when I'm introducing how 3 times 4 or 4 times 3 commutative property is the same thing, I love to use the Yonjuu cards for getting them to actually see this visually. I also love to use it for introducing division. So an example of that would be that if I want to do 28 divided by 5, I get the students to build that 28 in creative ways. Here is one way to build 28, 10 and 10 and 8. And then I'm dividing by 5, so I get them to see that I'm going to make groups of 5 now. So when I make groups of 5, I go ahead and almost like a plate, I'm putting some cookies on that plate. So here's one plate with 5, here's another plate with 5, here's another plate with 5, another one, which makes 5 groups of 5. I'm sorry, that should say 5, and 3 are remaining. So it, again, that makes it much easier for the student or the learner to understand that that's the same as 5 and 3/5. I'm also using it for algebra, especially to introduce integers. I then start using my cards, my red cards as negatives. And to show, for example, negative 7 plus 5, I use my Yonjuu cards to show to the student how I am going to be using the fact that if I had a positive 7 and a negative 7, they negate each other. But at this point, because I have negative 7 and these 5 positives, if I get these 5 right here, then I am filling this negative 7 actually with just negative 2, because these positives here will negate these negatives here, 5 and 5. So that is equal to positive 2 then. Or in this case, I'm not showing that example on the right side if some of you are confused. The example that I'm trying to show here is that what does negative 7 need to become a 5? which is also something that really confuses a lot of students. Like, what should I do? So I use the cards to explain that -7 and +7 would have negated each other. But now I'm going to go from -7 to a 0 and then get to that 5. That means that from the -7 to the 0, I've jumped 7 spaces, which is something you show on the number line as well. And then you have also jumped 5 spaces to reach 5. So you have actually made 12 jumps. This was the example that I spoke about first, that I'm trying to add -7 and 5. I also use it to show distributive properties, especially when we are introducing any variables. I start using my triangles as T and my circles as C. And if I want to show -7 plus -7T plus 5C doubled, then I use my Yonjuu cards to be showing to them how that distribution is very important to all the terms inside the bracket or parentheses, which is something that without the visuals becomes very difficult sometimes, because the student usually will do the 2 times -7T, but then forget to do it for any other term that follows. So this makes it really visual. I also use it for combining like terms, giving 6 cards, for example. I get my students to go ahead and understand that 5C for circles, 4C and 7C, like a family, can be added up, and that will become 16C, as opposed to these negatives here, which when I add them will stay negative 24T. And because they are not from the same family, I am meaning here the last name, which is the variable. I am not going to be able to further combine them. And this is now in simplest form. The other use of the cards is as the operations get higher and higher, where I basically get the students to represent their ordered pairs or their solutions to an equation, for example, using the cards. Because a lot of times when we're doing group work, there are always those students who will raise their hand or not raise their hand and just blurt out the answer. And then everybody who is actually working on that stops working. If you can actually imagine this in a classroom, these cards help my students, my learners, to be more silent and actually just put their responses on their desk, so that when I do a quick walk around, I do not have to look at their writing or their notebook. I just have to look at the cards, and they're pointing towards the X value and the Y value. And then I move on, give them a thumbs up, and I'm able to circle around the classroom a little better with the cards being used. Also for matrices, a lot of times when we're trying to show, for example, the adjoint of matrix A is what, I end up bringing back my reds as negatives to represent and show the same question that you may put on the board or on your whiteboard or project it using Yonjuu cards. Much easier for them to see that movement. Early years. So I have spoken about how I'm graduating with the cards. Now I want to come back. The cards are actually as useful as kids 3+. So coming back a little bit, what are some tasks that any pre-primary educator or parent can use? Here are some. We show the number. We get the child to identify the number. Then we ask questions such as, what is 1 more than the number? And again, because they are able to count these shapes, it's easier for them to then give 1 more, which is basically +1, or what's 1 less than the number. And you can also visually bring in the 6 and the 8 to see that comparison. Or questions such as, a lot of word problems, what number comes before this number, or what number comes after this number? And more earlier tasks, such as, how many more circles does this number need to become 8? Same question as what is 1 more than the number, but now not using the number 7, using more the circles in the card to develop language skills. How many more circles does this number need to become 9? Task. Which two cards here are the same shape? Which two cards here have the same number on them? Spot all the cards that are green, or spot all the cards that are pentagons, circles, triangles. What other colors and shapes do you see? Spot all the cards that are pentagons. This is where I'm introducing more cards than 2, 3, 4. Point to two cards here that are equal in value. How many pentagons are there in all? Getting them to actually reach addition without saying 5 plus 7. What does this 5 need to become 7? Trying to get them to understand subtraction. 10 needs to lose how many squares here to become 7? And then getting them to find all partners of 10. So can they actually locate as you teach them further on how to get to partners of 10. So 9 needs 1 more to become a 10, so that 9 and 1 make one partner. Then I have a 3 that needs 7 more to become a 10, so 3 and 7 is a partner. And 10 is 10 itself. Does 2 have a partner? No, 2 does not have a partner. What partner would have 2 needed? 2 would have needed an 8 more. So find all cards that make 10. Or how many more pentagons than circles do you see? Again, I'm trying to get them to do that 9 minus 7 without saying 9 minus 7. How many less circles than pentagons are here? So many times we're using language and word problems and we see our students struggling with it. Yonjuu helps very early learners develop that language very visually. How many shapes does 7 need to equal 9? Or some activities such as making patterns. What comes next? So here I have 1 square, 1 blue square, 1 black circle, 2 blue squares, 2 black circles, 3 blue squares, 3 black circles. What comes next? And I have many, many more pre-game tasks, which is something that I would use after earlier tasks, but before I introduce them to the basic version of the game, which is going to look like the following. Actually, I'll take you through some more concepts and then get back to some of those pre-game tasks if we have time. So here's a game I play with fractions. So I would give the students 2 cards and I ask them to create the largest fraction. And then the comparison is where they win if they get a bigger score. And we do this, we repeat this about 4 or 5 times. And after 5 rounds, we sum our scores to see who is the winner. So it's a partners game, but it's a very fun game to get students to just be able to understand how my improper fraction here, 10 divided by 5, is actually giving me a 2 compared to 9 divided by 1, which is giving me a 9, and then the right side person right now wins. And we repeat the process with using the values that are gained in the form of these cards as the score. Also, just basic comparison. I also do it with 3 cards and I get them to build the largest mixed number possible. And again, do a comparison to win. Really gets them to think how they can rearrange. And then I would end up even making this a subtraction problem and ask them that player B, for example, the one on the right side, has how many less points compared to player A on the left side. I also use it to introduce real numbers. I would get my students to first look at the fact that my whole numbers are listed here. But then when I do not include that 0, those are my natural numbers. And when I go and use my reds, which are my negatives, a lot of times, then I introduce them to the world of integers. using all of those. And of course, then dot, 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 or infinity, negative and positive. I also use it for statistics. Again, math is all about numbers in some places and problem solving. So, problem solving and strategic thinking and critical reasoning happens with the game itself. But with the cards, I make them use the cards to find the median, for example, and makes it much more visual for them to be able to see how I have arranged the cards from least to greatest. And then I'm able to see the middlemost value. And then also when I include one extra card, and how now having even number of cards, I have to find the average of the two middlemost values here. I'm also using it, as I mentioned, for group work in classes where I would get the students to say, list all the factors of 18 in pairs. And it makes it much easier, again, visually for the students to go ahead and place their 1 and 18, and then think about 2 and 9, and then 3 and 6. And it makes it a segue for me to then start talking about prime factorization or prime numbers, and then move on to GCF, HCF, and LCM. So I also use it to make teams, actually. So a lot of times we want to do group work in our classes, but sometimes pairing our students becomes a little monotonous, also because our students know sometimes that we will not let them sit with their friends, and they want that. So to make it very random, I am going to be holding Yonjuu cards at the door, and with a signature math high five, I get them to come to the class by selecting one card. And as they enter the room, I let them group themselves based on their shape or their color. So I say, well, all the pentagons are sitting together, or all the threes of circles will sit, or if I'm pairing or partnering, then I would say threes of circles will sit with three of squares. At this point, there are so many more uses, but I want to take some time to talk about why Yonjuu, and then leave the room open for any questions that you may have. And also, I am more than happy to show you those pre-game tasks. So Dr. Karen Purvis, who is no more, sadly, has a research that is unpublished, um, but it says that scientists have discovered that it takes approximately 400 repetitions to create a new synapse in the brain, unless it is done in play, in which case it takes only 10 to 20 repetitions. Whether it is researched, it's researched, but whether it is published or not, it's very powerful as a statement to understand. And I think any person who has taught their students, their learners, have understood how important play is in creating meaningful learning, and also this desire for learning. Also, most of learning is multisensory. There's this category that sometimes we like to put our students in, where we would say that these are visual learners and these are auditory learners. The reality is all of us are visual learners, all of us are auditory learners. If I just did this entire presentation by audio, I'm not sure I would have the same effect as I have had, hopefully, with the video and the presentation itself, by putting my cards out there. If you actually had the cards in your hand and you were playing the game while I was explaining or giving instructions, or got some chance to play, that would be even more effective. So all of us are all types of learners. And I also, when we do this gameplay of Yonjuu, then there is so much that comes out in terms of emotions and how to deal with emotions, because I am seeing that my classroom is being collaborative, communicating their needs, problem solving. I'm seeing resilience. I'm seeing my learners helping each other out. I'm also getting them to have a growth mindset, because then it gets them to be able to play better next time or have better luck next time based on the cards they are dealt with. And there's so much of perseverance and motivation that I see with this visual tool. So, with all of this, my hope is that you take Yonjuu as serving several purposes in your classroom. It is at the moment serving a lot of purposes in the classroom, household, hospitals, and boardrooms when it comes to corporates and team building as well. I would love to hear from all of you now on how you see yourself using Yonjuu in the classroom, and if you have any questions for me on how I can mathematize your classroom with a game or with Yonjuu. I think we can leave the room open for any questions.
Actually, there are lots of questions and lots of comments that have come up. And if I can take up a few initially, like if I can ask you a few and you can answer them, and we'll go forth in that. And whenever you
Absolutely.
need to explain, please let me know. I'll, hand over, like, I'll stop asking the questions. So, I
Absolutely.
mean, first of all, I think I speak from all the, I speak on behalf of all the participants that this is a really, really interesting way of teaching math. And I think Charu Mehta has also said, I wish I had learned how to do math like this. I would have never had a math phobia. And I am completely, in agreement with that. We have a lot of comments that are saying that is, very clear, very meaningful learning. And will definitely use, a lot of teachers have said that they will definitely use them in classroom teaching. But first of all, let me just start with this. We have questions that say, some of them are saying, where can we get the content of the cards? Is it possible to share them on a, in a PDF? Uh, One question I thought, if you could just answer that, how many students can play at the same time?
Very good question. This is such a good question. So I'm so glad you've asked this. Where can we get the cards in a moment? How many players can play the cards? So there are 44 cards, excluding the trump cards, four trump cards in the deck. Six students, six learners can adequately play the game with one deck of cards. Usually, because the cards are so versatile, a lot of schools are mostly considering taking at least 20 for their classrooms for the entire school, so that there are at least 4 to 5 in one classroom and at least about three in circulation, three complete sets. I'm talking about 3 or 4 being used simultaneously. For example, if seventh grade is teaching integers and you're taking 4 sets to classroom section A, and you're taking 4 to section B and 4 to section C, that makes right there 4 times 3 12. And then a primary or a high school classroom could also be using it simultaneously. Otherwise, what usually ends up happening is that the same one teacher will take, say, 5 decks to their classroom, which is sufficient for the class, 5 decks. And then there are not enough to be used simultaneously by another teacher in some other classroom. So, but if you're playing the basic version of the game with 6 cards, then 6 players can be seated in a group to play with one set. I hope that answers that question.
Okay, so now they want to know where they can get the Yonju cards.
Thank you. Okay. So at the moment, you want to go ahead and visit our website, www.hattennoki.com, and you want to click on Yonju, and that will lead you into how to get the cards. You may also email at jaspreet@hattennoki.com if you're looking for bulk orders for your schools or your children.
Very nice. Thank you for that. I actually have a question. Can you tell us a little about how you've named, Yonju, or you had mentioned the other names, Sanju and Rokuju, as well as Hatenoki. What is the thought behind these names, which I know are Japanese in origin?
Absolutely. So, Yonjuu means the number 40. Any significance for 40? A lot of students, a lot of learners, or teachers ask me. Well, I wanted to end up having my numbers in these 10 frames, and I wanted to go on the path of playing cards without the um, any gambling associated with just neat cards in a classroom. So a lot of probability and a lot of other things also I just like to do, because sometimes when we have playing cards, there's this question of, what is spade and what are diamonds. Here I'm using other math shapes. So I ended up using four colors, and I wanted to go all the way till 10 because that is sufficient to build so many other numbers. So Yonju is 40. All the other ones, because we are playing, for example, let's say for early years, before introducing Yonju, I actually play Niju, which is 20. That is the Japanese word for 20. Yonju is the Japanese word for 40. Hattennoki is a connector word, Hatten no ki, and it means the tree of development. And that has been vetoed by my own child who I homeschool. And I have gotten it from a very dear mentor of mine who's Japanese. I just love the name. And it also encapsulates everything that I do as an educator, having grown from being purely a math person to realizing what role language plays in learning, and then moving on to science of reading and comprehension, and then also upgrading myself on understanding that social emotional learning is the fabric of all learning. So that's when Maths with a Smile transformed to Hatanoki, which now deals with three verticals: math, English, and social emotional learning.
How lovely, how interesting. So, like, have you actually worked with in Japan or with Japanese? I know you just said that you loved the whole concept.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. I have not. I have worked with a lot of students who are from Japan. I have studied with a lot of students who are from Japan. Also, when I was at Columbia University, I have been in the US for a long time before I moved back to India. And at the moment, I use math from across the world. And with my understanding of being in education and math education for about 2 decades, I have been able to collect a lot of math from around the world and have some sense of how math is done, which is a universal language, but how it's introduced or how a concept is taught in various parts of the world. So I bring all of that in my teaching. And one of the things, when since we have time, I think as I'm looking at some of these questions, would be if anybody would be interested to learn some of these pre-game tasks that I have, because it's sometimes that even that 6 7 year old that I have spoken about to be the earliest member playing the basic version of the game, which is Yonju. Sometimes it's useful to actually do some warm-ups to get the child to even do the first step, which is to go ahead and add the six cards that they've received. So I would actually, if we can pause on the questions, Loparna, take the liberty to actually go over the pre-game tasks. Would that be a good idea?
Absolutely. Yes. I think that's a great idea. So, let's do that.
Introducing a child to the world of Yonju, I would do some of the early years tasks as well as these pre-game tasks, which would be giving them the card and ask one card and asking them what is this number and what comes before or after. Then I would start giving them 2 to 3 cards and getting them to find the smallest value or the largest value, again going by the shapes, the number of shapes inside these frames, and then getting them to arrange these cards in ascending or descending order. Then I would start introducing some more cards and getting them to identify the largest and the smallest card, which can also be used to teach range in statistics, and get them to find the difference between the highest and the lowest card. A lot of times, even the word difference is not something that we usually introduce to a child. Then I go back to my shapes and my colors, and I say, well, if you've identified that the highest card here is 10 and the lowest card here is 2, what does this 2 need to become a 10? And then I would do some activities like this that give two cards to compare sum or difference. I'll give them two cards and I'll get them to go ahead and add up all the shapes and tell me that there are 11 shapes in all, or tell me how many more squares are there compared to the triangles. I also do a lot of activities before I go into Yonjuu as a game. I will get them to keep identifying partners of 10, which are numbers that add up to 10, such as the 7 and 3, the 8 and 2. And I get them to then go ahead and just do the total using those tens, fast tens, 10 and 10, 20, and another 10, 30 to make 35. And then I'll ask questions like, what does this 35 need to become a 40? Or what does it need to become a 36? So just slowly get them there. So those would be my warm-ups. And so many other questions, such as find any two cards here that have a sum of 15, which gets them to understand partners of 15. So 10 and 5, of course, is a partner. But then what about 7 and 8? That also makes 15. And can I find any other ways to make 15? If I don't use two cards, I can use three cards to make 15 using the 10, the 2, and the 3. So many different ways to use the cards as pre-game tasks. Find any two cards that have a difference of 3, for example, now, and that also gets really interesting. So looking at 8 and 5 or 10 and 7 to make that difference, or get them to build a number using a very specific task, such as use these two black cards and the other cards in a way that you can make a 25, for example. So once they use those two black cards, they get some thing to start with, which is the 12. And then the subtraction or the difference leads them to that they need 13. And then again, strategic thinking comes in, because how will I make the 13 if I have already used up the 10 and the 2? And that's when they start going into thinking of numbers that are remaining that can be partners of 13, which is going to be 8 and 5. As I said, we can also be playing Niju, which is not Yonjuu, but a sum of 20 with 4 cards. And that is how I introduce Yonjuu to my first, second, third grader. So gradually, then I will go on to the concept of finding the sum of 6 cards distributed. Of course, every time, even for grown-ups, to first identify partners of 10 within the cards. So those would be some pre-game tasks that I would have. And I will definitely switch gears back, Loparna, to go ahead to any other questions that our participants may have that I will be able to answer.
Yes, thank you, Jaspreet. In fact, there is a very interesting question that has come up,
Yes.
and from Suma Vivekanandan. She says, what about the writing part? Bringing little ones in the writing mode is a problem. Actually, they don't like to write. So, in a 40 minutes period, how do you combine, the Yonju playing with the cards with writing? Is that possible? Or in any other way? With the one with the 20s also, I think, would work.
Yes, very good question. Um, I don't have the specific quote, but something that I think is very important, and I may not be quoting it right, but for early childhood, for pre primary, before a child holds a pencil in their hand, they should be punching, pressing, squishing, using Play Doh, using sand, suji, rava, or whatever you have at your disposal to be able to do so many pre writing concepts, to be able to use those motor skills or to have pincer grip, to be able to actually then graduate from those to from that Play-Doh or that sand to a crayon and then eventually a pencil. So there's time for that. I think it depends on the curriculum, but sometimes there's always this high need, and I completely get it. Teachers are at no fault when it comes to this time crunch that they have to finish the syllabus. However, um, I have so much to say on that. In fact, I have a program called Math from Scratch, which teaches educators on how to slow down, but make sure that the concepts are actually very visual, pictorial, and sensory before it goes into abstract. So, writing will happen, absolutely will happen. But before that, the playing around, that sensory experience, that tactile experience, I think is very important. And then transferring that onto writing will gradually actually will happen with some planning. But on that, I would just say that as a consultant, there is a way to do it, and it is possible. But definitely, it needs a lot of hand holding to our best of the best educators, because sometimes we've just been doing it for very long a certain way, and maybe stuck or maybe not able to move forward, knowing that there are better ways. So I will be happy, and that will be another webinar for Centa to think about to address this one.
Abs- Absolutely. I mean, the points that you raised about the pre-writing, right? I think that is a very very important part in the child's development, like the fine motor skills, the gross motor skills. So even before they start writing, all of those activities, apart from like the cards, are absolutely a very very good way of taking this forward. So we have people who have joined in from different countries in Africa, from Nigeria and other countries, and then of course all parts of India. I see participants from Philippines. So and a lot of them want to know a little more about the how to get the cards, uh, or like how to use the cards in their classrooms.
Great. How to use the cards? You want to go back and rewatch our live. How to get the cards? You want to go ahead and visit www.hattennoki.com. There's a tab there on top called Yonjuu. And when you reach Yonjuu, you will be able to connect with us, or you can write to me at this email. And I'm also very pleased to inform that the cards have reached across the globe already and are already being used in my partner schools all across the globe. So they are very much very global now, and they've also reached some hospitals where some pediatricians and some nurses and doctors working with neurodivergent patients or patients of Alzheimer's have been using the cards. So it's a blessing, where I have seen the cards transcend beyond the classroom and reaching a corporate or a hospital or a home, for a parent to bond and have some time, quality time with their child, to do some math and critical thinking and problem solving with the cards and bond.
That is great. Thank you. Uh, just wanted to know if we have some more questions. If anybody else wants to type in their questions, this is a great time to ask Jaspreet all your doubts. Uh, so while most of the comments now are about how interesting it is and how children, how they're looking forward to using these strategies, I had a very interesting comment that I had noted down, which said that this is the same as using integer slabs. So I don't remember who had put it in the comments, but I noted it down. So could you would you be able to tell us a little more on that? Does that make sense to you? The um, same as using integer slabs.
I would love to know if the person is still around to give a little bit on what integer slabs are. I am not aware of integer slabs in it. Is that a game? I would love to be educated.
Okay. I am trying to find. Yeah, if there is somebody who's put in the integer slab one, if you could just
I would love to be able to still answer this question, Aluparna.
please go
Um,
ahead.
of course, I would love to have more knowledge on it. But a lot of times there, and I think I also saw the chat on dominoes or any other, everything, any manipulative you have, our hands are a manipulative. So it just makes it so much more portable sometimes to be able, and abacus is a manipulative. So I am not discounting at any point the other manipulatives that are already out there in your classrooms. However, if you have blocks, for example, the portability, and also the fact that Yonjuu's numbers are actually in the frames, makes it easier for the purpose of being able to see that 4 magnitude wise, and also to be able to see that that 4 needs a 6 more, for example, to become a 10. So that's that visual. Some people prefer that, and some people are okay with building blocks or Legos or anything else in their classroom to show number sense, and that's totally fine. The one other thing that I actually get a lot from a lot of people is the box. The box itself makes it very easy for the kids to actually pack up, because that's a very important part of the classes as well, to clean up. And so many times teachers don't have the time as they're wrapping up to be able to clean up and get the kids to clean up and own up so that the room is ready for the next class. So the cards go inside almost like that, and it's much easier as early as a 3-year old to go ahead and pack it, and it's ready to be put on the shelf. So there are advantages to and disadvantages to so many things. I have seen a lot of parents vouch for the fact that they can just put this in their handbag or in their backpack and use it on a flight or anywhere where they can just spread the cards out, play Yonju anywhere. So that portability, and also this packing that just goes back, and the ribbon being used to actually lift them up, is something that is also giving me a lot of love from educators.
Thank you for that, Jaspreet. Geeta Venkataraman has said that she can explain this thing, integer slabs, and I think she's going to type it out, and we'll just wait for her to just type that out. Meanwhile, Suma Vivekanandan says that I do agree for pre-primary level, but I was asking about grade 3 and 4 where writing is an integral part.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Suma. Reduction of or use of how long you want to use the cards in one period will, and definitely reduce the activities that you will end up doing with the cards, will be at your disposal, because once they reach you as an educator, your lesson plans and maybe modifications of those will dictate how much time you have and how much time you have for the game or any activity with the cards, and then to be able to transfer information into the notebooks or wherever we are trying to get the concepts to stick for a reference. So I will definitely say that that will be left to your discretion. But I completely get it, because we do need our kids to be able to have reference to anything that we have taught, and note taking is a skill in itself. So definitely simultaneously it won't happen, but that is another thing that needs to be taught, and you may want to take the help of the literacy teachers, the English teachers as well, or any language teachers to help you, and work in collaboration to get that to happen. Sometimes it's also because a lot of times, and that's a debate for many people, that cursive versus writing in lowercase, that also sometimes limits the ability to write in a flow. So motor skill development and all of that will mean that you're working in tandem with the learning specialist, the literacy specialist, um, and working together rather than taking it all on your shoulders as the math educator.
True, true, very true. So, while I mean, this has been a really, really interesting and a very, very enlightening session where math has become, a fun thing, and I'm sure all children look forward to such math classes, and the concepts become very clear very early on. So I would like to thank all of you participants for joining this session, but most of all, thank you, Ms. Jaspreet, for this very, very engaging and informative session for all our participants. I'm sure each one of us has had a lot of takeaways from this session, and I know some of you have been asking for more activities. I would suggest, please, Jaspreet has shared a lot of activities for different grades, different levels. So please go back to the YouTube session. It's very simple. Just type, YouTube center session 243 center YouTube webinar or cent talk, and you will get that. Uh, so this, we will be sharing a record of the participation for this webinar by tomorrow once you fill the feedback form. I'd really, once again, thank you, Ms. Jaspreet, for this wonderful session. For the participants, please attend our next session on April 15th, 2024. And this is a Hindi webinar series on Kaksha mein Hindi Shikshan mein Navchar ke Prati Jagrukta. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. To register for more such upcoming webinars, please visit the Center app. And don't forget, I know most of you filled out the feedback form, but those who haven't, a reminder, please fill the feedback form. And have a wonderful evening. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Senta, for this opportunity. And thank you, everyone, for your time.